On May 1st, 1907, in Richmond, Virginia, Oliver White was born. At the age of 9, Hill first remembers meeting his father. The meeting was unpleasant, as Hill became nauseated in the streetcar they rode in, and his father asked if Hill wanted to come live with him. After his mother remarried, Oliver changed his last name to that of his stepfather, becoming Oliver Hill. Hill lived in Roanoke with his mother and stepfather, but his family that raised him were the Pentecosts. From early on, Hill learned that he should be addressed with respect, regardless of race. Frequently, white salesmen would knock on doors in black communities and ask for the lady of the house by her first name. If permitted to come into the home, they would not take off their hats. However, if a salesman asked for Miss Pentecost by her first name, anyone home would say, "Not to you," and slam the door. If the salesman asked for Miss Pentecost by her last name, he was allowed to enter the home. After being told to take off his hat, if he didn't comply, the salesman was told to leave. Early on, Hill demanded and expected to be treated by white folks with the same respect as they did one another. On several occasions, Miss Pentecost would ask for something from the attic, and Hill would get it. The attic was pitch black, and Hill would have to search for the light. Although Hill didn't know at the time, the item was often pre-planted to teach Hill not to be scared of the dark. And Oliver Hill also went into the dark attic again throughout his life by fighting for civil rights. Throughout grade school, Hill was a mischievous student. Although he was a smart student, he often played class pranks on teachers and talked in class. One time, Hill snuck a cricket into school and rubbed it to make it squeak. When the teacher looked for the cricket, it was nowhere to be found. Hill finished middle school in Roanoke, then moved to Washington, D.C., and attended Dunbar High School. At Dunbar, Hill met Neville Thomas, a history teacher who filled in the blanks in American history. He taught about the role African Americans play in our history and encouraged his students to learn and research outside of their history book. Later, as a sophomore at Howard University, Hill's Uncle Sam passed away. Sam was a prominent lawyer. His wife gave Hill a 1924 United States Code annotated book that sparked Hill's interest in law. In reading the United States Code annotated, he learned that the Constitution regarded African Americans as 3/5 of a person, legalized slave trade in America until 1808, and supported slaveholders. Motivated by the troubling role of the Supreme Court in taking away African American rights, Hill made up his mind to become a lawyer to fight for justice under the law. In law school, Hill met his future wife, Beresenia Walker, along with future Supreme Court Justice and good friend Thurgood Marshall. While studying at Howard, Hill helped to bring together black communities to call for equality under the law. The NAACP is a civil rights organization that promotes equality for African Americans. Back in Roanoke, Hill joined the NAACP and organized the Virginia State Conference in 1934. This same year, Walker and Hill married, and just 4 years later had their only son, Oliver Hill Jr. Hill visited churches and attended community meetings in several districts throughout Virginia to advocate for more support for the Salary Equalization Project. He fought for justice by advocating for public school transportation for black students and filing lawsuits against school boards to protest unfair teacher salaries. In Virginia, 1940, the average black teacher salary was between $400 and $1,000. However, the average white teacher salary was between $1,000 and $1,800. Hill worked closely with Marshall to highlight this disparity in salaries of black and white teachers. A case was filed as Alston versus School Board of the City of Norfolk. After many setbacks, in 1940, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled that the pay scale unfairly discriminated against black teachers. Even though this was a victory, it was short-lived because school boards chose not to acknowledge it. However, it did encourage more black teachers to stand up and speak out against prejudice and unfair pay. Hill continued fighting. He not only fought to equalize salaries, he also fought for equal education and transportation In white schools, students were taught advanced courses including electronics, chemistry, and physics. However, in black schools, students were taught home economics, beauty culture, carpentry, and bricklaying. Oliver Hill was a firm believer that in order to make a difference and challenge segregation, African Americans had to vote and take office. In 1948, Hill won a seat on the Richmond City Council and was the first African American to do so in over 5 decades. On April 23, 1951, Barbara Johns, an African American, led her school to strike to protest the deplorable conditions, which included no running water. She contacted the NAACP, and Hill met with the students and parents to end school segregation. She contacted the NAACP, and Hill met with the students and parents to end school segregation. This became one of the 5 cases consolidated into the Brown versus School Board of Education case. The case asked the court to prevent any discrimination towards black students and to announce segregation unconstitutional. After much negotiation and hard work, on May 17, 1954, the Supreme Court ruled school segregation unconstitutional. However, this victory came at a hefty price. Hill and his family received many threats, the worst being a cross was burnt on Hill's front lawn. The Massive Resistance Program was led by Senator Byrd and the Virginia Assembly, our legislative branch. The Massive Resistance Program was designed to hurt African American people. As a part of the Massive Resistance, the General Assembly created laws that targeted the NAACP. These new laws required the NAACP to register in each state and make its membership public. The General Assembly also had the NAACP investigated. It also encouraged several schools to close down rather than to allow African American students to attend the school. As a result, county officials closed all Prince George schools. During and after the Massive Resistance, Hill remained instrumental in the fight towards equality in the desegregation of schools. Truman appointed Hill to the Committee on Government Contract Compliance, where he looked for discrimination in government contract laws. In 1960, Hill was invited to prepare civil rights policies for the Democratic Committee. A year later, Hill served under President Kennedy's administration. Lastly, in 1968, Hill was appointed by Governor Godwin to the Virginia Commission on Constitutional Revision, which authored the Virginia Constitution. At the dear age of 91, Oliver Hill retired from his law firm. Shortly after, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Honor by President Clinton. Ironically, in 2003, Hill was named Virginian of the Year by the General Assembly. 2 years later, he received the Spring Arm Medal, which is the highest honor awarded by the NAACP. On August 5, 2007, surrounded by his family, Oliver Hill passed away. He was 100 years old. So why do I care about Oliver Hill? What does his life mean to me? Oliver Hill fought for justice. He judged people by their character and not the color of their skin. He represented people even when the odds were stacked against them, simply because it was the right thing to do. He fought for equal pay, desegregation of schools throughout Virginia, and his contributions led to the abolishment of Jim Crow laws throughout the nation. He was a force to be reckoned with.
An inspiration, a trailblazer,
a hero,
a leader,
and an icon. Early on, Oliver Hill learned not to be afraid of the dark. And in the end, he advised us to face the dawn and not the setting sun. A new day is being born.